speed does not win over alignment. Alignment is what gets us to success. So pause just long enough, reflect, get clear, and then move on with confidence.
The most valuable lessons don't come from success stories, but from moments where things didn't land as expected.
History has shown us over and over again that you can't skip over the foundational work. It's not the technology, it's how we implement it and how we as an organization, as people, as culture are going about it.
Starting with clarity is everything. Building responsibility and investing in the foundation before scaling changes the entire trajectory of AI initiative. Welcome back to the human side of AI. Almost most projects start with a strong momentum. The idea makes sense, the team is so excited to start the project, and early signals look very promising. Then somewhere along the way, progress slowed, decisions become much harder, alignment starts to slip, and what once felt clear became complicated. Most organizations have lived through that experience, with or without AI. In the last episode, we talked about measuring impact and showing real business value. Today, we turn our attention to the other side of the journey, because every AI transformation runs into friction, and often the most valuable lessons don't come from success stories, but from moments where things didn't land as expected. Dora, thanks so much for joining today.
I'm so happy to be here with you, Omar. Thank you.
I believe you have seen enough of these situations, if I can say that.
With 30 years in corporate and continuing beyond that now, yes.
Yeah, more often it's a turning point. So let's start by unpacking why AI initiatives break down in the first place and across all industries, across several use cases. From your perspective and from your experience, what are the most common reasons you see AI initiatives fail?
I think our listeners might be surprised to hear that I think the reasons are more human than are technology. They're about technology. So it's not so much that AI fails because of AI. It's a technology, of course, it's evolving, of course, we're learning. But in my experience, why AI implementations or AI projects, and to be honest, why any implementation of a new transformative type of technology fails, it's because of the human side of things, which means when we don't pay attention to people understanding the why, people actually understanding why they need to be part of this transformative journey, we'll figure out the technical. What it's the hardest thing, and the core reasons for failure is people are not engaged. They don't understand why they should change doing what they're doing, what's in it for them. It's not clear also what is the business value, the business goal. Another reason that I've seen, and I've seen that reported in studies as well, is weak data foundations. It goes back to things that we've talked in the past, right? These types of transformative programs, AI is a transformative capability, let's call it that, right? Implementing transformative technology capability, really. It means that we need to work cross-functionally, which means we need to work well together, understand each other, speak the same language. All that means that we have to have all of the right data foundations around data management, governance, guardrails, security, all of those things, which are hard to implement, especially at scale. So in my experience, all of that around the clarity, the right reasons, people being engaged, which speaks to change management and making sure that we're doing that throughout, starting early, not an afterthought. Change management, it's not an afterthought. In the overwhelming majority of situations, it's really one of the very core reasons why these types of implementations fail. So really, it's very core. But because typically I've seen organizations strive with the technology and not the people, the culture, the process, and the foundational pieces, it's why they fail. So it's really culture and operations that break it when those are not intact and thoughtfully on a continuous basis catered to.
That resonates a lot, Dora, and I think this will relate back to what we discussed before in one of the episodes, that organizations should be ready first to absorb that change, to absorb that transformation journey. And that leads us directly to one of the most common traps organizations fall into early on. How can organizations avoid falling into the trap of AI for the sake of AI.
Which is such an easy trap to fall into.
Yes.
Such an easy trap. So start with being aware that that's an easy path to go down to. So how to avoid it? Realize that it is not the hype. It is not doing something for the fear of missing out because everybody's talking about AI. Realizing also that AI too is not a magic bullet. I know it can be overhyped and is the shiny new thing. I tend to call it the buzz du jour. You know, I've spent a lot of time, 20 of my 30 years in corporate, I've done enterprise architecture. So I've seen a lot of different technologies. There's always a new technology. Even right now, everything that we're talking about AI, which we're focusing a lot of the time, we're having this conversation around agentic AI and agents and incorporating that into workflows. And it was about generative AI before that. It was about something else. In other words, there's always something. And even this right now, agentic AI and integrating it is going to change tomorrow. We're going to be talking more about physical AI. We're going to be talking more about different versions of AI. We're going to be talking about quantum computing. There's always going to be something new. So understanding that we're not doing this for the sake of whatever the technology is, which, like I was saying, I refer to it as buzz du jour, the buzz of the day, but we're doing it for what clear reasons, what business objective. And when we start driving with that perspective and not doing it for the sake of everyone else is doing it, or because we think it's going to solve everything, there's no magic bullet. Like history has shown us over and over again that you can't skip over the foundational work, going back to the basics, which is answering those questions of who does what, when, where, why now. It's as basic as that. But those basic, simple questions to answer are really hard to implement because it's pitfalls that organizations have fallen into over and over again. So again, it's a culture shift and a mindset shift. So when we start realizing that, I think, and taking obviously intentional steps and measuring success the right way and not by, like we were saying in an earlier conversation, how many models were rolled out, but how is this helping us? And then we're going to stop doing AI for the sake of AI. Because here's what's happening. When we are doing AI for the sake of AI, it leads to disappointment because it does not bring the return to the investment because it's being done for the wrong reasons. So starting from the very beginning with a very clear why, and then all of these other things that we talked about, that will help us get out of that pitfall of doing AI for the sake of AI and then being let down that it doesn't help us. It's not the technology, it's how we implement it and how we as an organization, as people, as culture are going about it.
I love how you framed it, Dora, and I would like to shift the gear a little bit into a more advanced, maybe a question related to the same point, where even if some organizations have a clear business intent, have clear directions, all the foundations and levels that we discussed, from your experience, where do data or governance issues typically derail AI projects? And how can teams catch them early? In one of the episodes, you discussed an example where the data quality itself, they had some issues in the data and the isolated functional systems that are the single source of truth for all the transformation. So from your experience, how we can tackle this point?
Well, you're highlighting it as a pitfall. So I think pulling in the right people and understanding, being aware of what are the different pitfalls. What's happening when data governance, for instance, derails projects, I think that starts happening before people notice. So what I'm trying to say is knowing that this is a pitfall and arming ourselves like, hey, what does the industry tell us? What does history and how we've implemented projects in the past tell us? Where do we go wrong? So learning from lessons past within our own organization, but also what the industry says and paying attention to the best practices, but then taking that seriously and in more practical terms. And even in the example that I had shared in a prior episode that you just brought up, Omar, when you bring people into a room and then you see that people just kind of like, okay, we're talking about, but they kind of like nod their heads, but there isn't like a healthy conversation. Chances are good that we're not going deep enough to really reconcile how people are thinking about, like you said, the data. And it's not about the data, it's about what it means. It's about what it means to the different people representing different business processes, different business divisions, for instance, right? So when you have a healthy conversation, because in my experience, It is rare to see organizations that actually think and operate at the enterprise level at the same level. That's why we're having so many transformational initiatives, which are also part of digital transformations. Digital transformation incorporates the people, the culture, right? So when you bring people into the same room and they start talking, there isn't a lot of healthy communication about, wait a minute, you think of it like that, but we think of this like this way. How are we going to bring it together? If it's mentioned and people are nodding and say, yeah, we got to do something about it, but then they keep on going on and just keep on burning cycles, we're going down and we start implementing, that lack of enough focus on governance that ensures that we're not just doing things, but we're coming together good enough that the outcome, the output actually is going to drive the outcome at the end. So we got to have the clear ownership across the cross-functional efforts. We have to put in the time to understand what does this mean and how we're going to continue defining it and managing it accordingly across the functions, because we start from different angles, different versions, most likely. And starting putting those levers into the process from early on. That's, when that doesn't happen, or if the friction is too much where people don't want to work together, to me, that's a clear signal that governance is not happening at the right level, and it can derail projects when it's at one edge or the other. Not paying too much attention to it, or going way too heavy into it and being too rigid.
Yeah, exactly. I cannot agree more, Dora. And these issues rarely appear overnight, like you mentioned. They are building in the background, very quiet. And by the time teams feel the impact,
Why it's important to even have some roles in the projects and those are typically, I think, change management roles as well, but actually having a role that it is named and it has specific goals, if you will, to keep an eye and keep the finger on the pulse, if you will. Is this happening? Is there too much friction that we just keep unmasking as we're going? Or does everything really seem really easy? That means people are not engaged. That means we're just building stuff and we're going to go through, and technically things might implement, but like examples that we spoke about before, what comes out technically might be, integrations technically might work, but what comes out is not being trusted, is not being used, which again, is not what we want. That's not the effective way. It's not going to work that way. So making it a point to pay attention to it, and not only what we build and how fast we build it, that makes a difference.
That's very powerful. And as you know, this is where teams learn over time. We learn from our pitfalls and from our failure points.
Yes.
Can you share a practical lesson that you learned from a failed AI transformation project?
A practical lesson is to be, I'm going to say, brave enough to, when you recognize it, you pause and you reset, or you recalibrate, or you refine. That's a practical lesson. And I think one of the examples that I mentioned, Diver, in last episode, spoke about that and how the company was courageous enough once they figured out that something, the data was saying, hey, this is not working, it's not being adopted, to go ahead and make the big change. So a practical lesson would be to, one, be intentional about keeping an eye on these things, and two, when it happens, rather than avoid it, rather than try to mask it, it's actually having the typically tough conversations, because this is what that means. When that happens, that typically means there's a tough conversation to be had with leadership that says that we said it was going to take X amount of time, X dollars, and we were going to hit it. What happens is many of these foundational things are being underestimated. And when the execution starts, we realize that, okay, maybe we need to pay more attention. Okay, maybe we need to pull more functional expertise into this. Maybe we need to, it's going to take us longer to do that. How much difference there was there cross-function is a lot bigger gap than we thought, which means we need to do deeper work, working together to come together so that whatever we feed our AI models, it's actually trustworthy and relevant, and it's going to give us the right information on the other end, right? That is a tough conversation to have, because that means we're not going to hit our time targets that we had in mind. It will probably cost a little bit more, or there's a different way of what we thought. There's something different. So the practical step is, well, again, how do we measure success? If we measure success in terms of being busy, creating outputs, then okay, keep on going. But that means you burning dollars and you really taking the organization backwards because it just keeps on confusing things. You're changing things that were there, and the new way of while implementing, it's not going to work. So now people are confused. They're not engaged. We still have some legacy operations happening. So the courageous thing to do and the practical thing to do is, if what we're measuring is we really want to make sure that we are transforming, that we are meeting our goals, is go back and have those conversations and explain in very calm, simple, transparent terms, here's the situation. I don't know of any leader that once they understand, hey, here's what it means if we don't do it, here's what it means if we do. I mean, every leader is measured on outcomes, not on outputs, I would like to think. And actually, the organization and, the teams that are put together to drive the initiatives, keeping an eye on what's happening and taking the step to go back and recalibrate, refine, reset in some cases when we are seeing this derailment or these challenges. It's an important part of the process.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I will recall something from one of your Doraism, if I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Doraism? Yes.
Yeah. Pause and reflect with clarity.
Yes.
I encourage everyone out there to check the Doraism shows that Dora publish every now and then. And I totally agree with you. When organizations take time to reflect and instead of assigning blame, they build stronger foundation for future initiatives. So
yeah, when organizations and when the stakeholders start talking about blame, that means we're not really working together as one team. That means we're not being measured and the incentives are not there for everyone. Again, this is not me against you, this division against that division. This is how do we come together. So, and I know we've had this conversation in prior episodes, to have the right incentives that are common, they're clearly understood. Well, common meaning they roll up to common goals. They may look a little bit different for every division, every person, but at the end of the day, it brings the cross-functional stakeholders to work together, and they're being measured on winning as one team. Otherwise, you're not winning. And you're absolutely right about that. Doraism. I even put something even quicker out there on LinkedIn, I believe, with a beginning of the year, which is about when we're recording this. So last week I said, okay, my best advice as we kick off the year, where there's this quiet pressure to keep on going, move fast, do the next thing, is to pause long enough. I'm not saying pause forever. Pause long enough because you feel it. There is something off here, or there's too much pressure to go fast. But speed does not win over alignment. Alignment is what gets us to success. So pause just long enough, reflect, get clear, and then move on with confidence, because we want to make sure that we succeed. We're not just staying busy doing things.
100% true. 100%. And I would like to end this episode by looking forward. We are always optimistic. If you could rewrite the AI playbook, what are the 3 most important things you would change about how organizations start AI initiatives?
The number one in my mind, clarity. Clarity over speed, and alignment over speed as well. So clarity, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? Are we aligned? Trump speed and going fast always. So that's number one. Number 2, I would say, is the fundamentals. Make sure we just can't shortcut our way through doing the hard work of coming together, speaking the same language. And a lot of that, it's a lot of the data fundamentals, governance. Again, governance and guardrails enough to enable the organization to go forward together as one and be innovative, not to stifle progress and innovation. So I want to be careful here that we're doing this in a balanced way, not one way or the other. And the third key component, if I were to rewrite the AI playbook, would be to really start with humans and adoption as part of the design early on. We're not doing AI, again, to the conversation and the very thoughtful questions that you asked me, Omar, for the sake of AI. And it takes that culture change that humans, how they benefit. So making sure that that's a very core component of how we implement this playbook. And we're designing for the benefit of the organization and humans and culture and people and how they're involved, it's all part of the design, and we're driving the adoption. Change management is huge. So it's a lot of the things that we talked about. I'm going to also finish with that one thought. Whatever we do, it needs to be trustworthy. If the trust is not there, it's not going to be adopted. It's not going to succeed. And this is why clarity trumps speed. This is why we need the fundamentals in place, the foundational work, as hard as it is, which requires people to work together cross-functionally. And this is why, number 3, we need to design with the human element in place and make sure that, that's part of the process. And change management, which means changing people, behaviors, and habits, and the culture is part of it. Those are the keys to success.
That's a powerful way to frame it. Starting with clarity is everything. Building responsibility and investing in the foundation before scaling changes the entire trajectory of AI initiative. Any final thoughts?
Based on what you just said, Omar, I would say that we can't really scale unless we do the foundational work. And that's an important distinction for leaders and organizations to understand. Everybody talks about scaling, but we cannot successfully scale without a solid foundation in place. And those components of get clear, work together cross-functionally, do the hard foundational work, and don't forget about driving the transformation with the humans that are part of it, not just the technology. That's how we'll scale. So thank you for reminding us all about that.
Thank you, Dora, for that. And as always, this brings us to the end of today's episode from the human side of AI video series. If I can recap, today we explored why AI initiatives fail, how organizations fall into the AI for AI's sake trap, and where data and governance issues quietly derail progress, and how teams can learn from failure instead of repeating it in the future initiatives. Dora, thank you again. This is a conversation every organization working with AI needs to hear.
Thank you for having me, Omar. I'm grateful to be here and have this conversation with you.
It's always my pleasure. In the next episode, we'll step back and look at the bigger picture. Are we living in an AI bubble, or are we entering a new stage of maturity? See you in the next episode.